Colombia plans to begin its vaccination campaign against COVID-19 on February 20. Canada suspends flights to Mexico and all Caribbean nations in an attempt to slow the spread of new COVID-19 variants. And African leaders meet in Angola for a summit on armed conflict in the Central African Republic. Hello and welcome to teleSUR. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. Colombia is set to begin its vaccination campaign against COVID-19 on February 20 after reaching a deal for the purchase of vaccine doses with pharmaceutical companies Moderna and Sinovac Biotech. Colombia aims at least 1 million people vaccinated against the virus by the end of March. The government has already secured agreements with various other vaccine-producing companies.
Mass vaccination in Colombia will begin on the 20th of February. The weeks prior to February, we will be sending effective communication. We will be doing pedagogy. We will be doing campaigns. We will have all the logistics with the local health networks. Purchases of vaccine doses have already been completed with the pharmaceutical companies to guarantee vaccination for a target population that we have set in the National Vaccination Plan.
In Mexico, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has said that he's recovering well from COVID-19 after testing positive for the virus early this week. The president has been receiving treatment in his apartment in the National Palace.
I still have COVID, but the doctors tell me I am getting through the critical stage. I am doing well. Now, I'm here to avoid rumors or miscommunication. I am doing well, but I still need to be resting. I grew myself today to present this message to you. I have not been like this in these past days, but wearing other clothes. I have been working, paying attention to all the public affairs, especially about the pandemic. I spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who expressed solidarity, and he offered to send us vaccines, the Sputnik V, a vaccine they're producing. Those vaccines produced by Russia and are going to arrive shortly. I expect by the end of the following week.
In Ecuador, the Vice President of the National Electoral Council, Enrique Pita, expressed his opinion regarding the situation surrounding the printing ballot papers for the election of the Andean Parliament, which remains behind schedule.
The situation of candidates for the Andean Parliament is a very complicated situation. In the first place, the social justice political organizations has been introducing appeals of the legal nature that have not allowed us to close this chapter. Last night, social justice presented a final appeal before the electoral court that prevents us from having the absolute freedom to print the ballots. It is to be expected that if the contentious electoral court takes an immediate action with respect to this appeal, we could print the ballots and send them out in time, independently of the electoral packs that were already dispatched to all the polling stations abroad fundamentally. In the event that we have not concluded the legal actions regarding the candidates to the Andean Parliament, the option would be, by force majeure, to call a second round of elections for this process.
In Chile, social and indigenous movements gather in the capital's Dignity Square to commemorate the anniversary of the murders of Jorge Luis Mota and Ariel Moreno at the hands of the police. Mota and Moreno were brutally murdered while they were participating in the widespread anti-government demonstrations that began in late 2019. Mota lost his life after being run over by a police equestrian corps truck, while Moreno died after being shot in the head. This Friday's protest saw strong police repression, maintaining until the withdrawal of officers at around 7 p.m. local time, when demonstrators began protest actions to demand the freedom of political prisoners at the end of the state repression. Venezuela's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jorge Arriaza, informed about the meeting held with the Vice Minister of Cuba and co-president of the Integral Cooperation Agreement between both nations, Ricardo Cabrizas.
We have just met with the Vice Prime Minister of the Republic of Cuba, Ricardo Cabrizas. who is also the co-president of the Integral Cooperation Agreement between Venezuela and Cuba. Here, at the Antonio José de Sucre House, we have received the delegation that accompanies him, and we have been able to talk with the Vice Prime Minister about different topics of the binational economy, our economic projects, and beyond the projects of our Integral Cooperation Agreement in matters of health, education, and culture.
In this regard, Arreaza said that the meeting with the Cuban vice minister consolidated the relationship between the two countries, and they also discussed geopolitical and economic aspects of the importance for the region and the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic.
It has been a meeting in which we were able to update our status, and beyond the blows that imperialism has dealt us in recent years, trying to prevent our fluid relationship, our union, sanctioning companies of both countries, trying to prevent the transport for the production of oil, food products, affecting tourism, affecting the relationship, we can say that the relationship between Cuba and Venezuela is in an exceptional moment, and that it will continue to deepen over the years in the conditions that arise. We made a review in terms of geoeconomic, geopolitics of our region, Latin America, the Caribbean, ALBA, our Bolivarian alliance, and how, with our economic projects and health projects, the production of vaccines in our territories, the status of Cuban vaccines in their scientific testing process, well, there we have it. There will be soon good news in all senses.
The Secretary General of the United Nations wants the Biden administration to remove Cuba from the United States' unilateral list of state sponsors of terrorism. The information was provided by the spokesman of the UN Secretary General, Stéphane Dujarric, who pointed to Gutierrez's disagreement with the inclusion of the Caribbean island on the list drawn up by the U.S. State Department. The Secretary General's statement came during an interview with the permanent representative of Cuba to the United Nations, Pedro Luis Pedroso, last Tuesday. For his part, Pedroso pointed out that the recent inclusion of Cuba on this list was part of a personal campaign of former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who was committed to discredit foreign policy. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced tighter travel restrictions in response to the new variants of the coronavirus and suspended air travel to Mexico and all Caribbean destinations until April 30th. The government will introduce mandatory PCR testing at airports for people returning to Canada. The Prime Minister said those with positive tests will be quarantined immediately at designated government facilities to ensure they do not carry the new variants of the virus. Trudeau said his government and Canada major airlines had agreement to suspend services to the Caribbean and Mexico, among them Air Canada, WestJet, and Air Transat. More stories coming up, don't go away. Welcome back. This Friday saw the 5th virtual meeting of the Pueblo group with the participation of leaders from 17 countries of the Latin American region. Participants debated the Progressive Manifesto, a document that seeks to promote a model of development based on solidarity and guarantees the consolidation of Latin America as a zone of peace. They also discussed strategies to advance in the reduction of social inequality in the region. Among the political leaders who participated were the President of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, who during his speech advocated the need to rebuild Latin American unity.
It is essential for Latin America to be united once again as a whole, and to discuss again regardless of the governments that in each case and at each moment are leading our countries. The important thing is that we understand that united we can achieve much more than separated. The pandemic has shown us what has been the result of all of us running against the unknown on our own side. It would have been much better to have a place where we could meet, where we could tackle the pandemic together, where we could even negotiate together the vaccines that are needed. And this shown that everything is more difficult divided.
The former president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, pointed out that the crisis generated by the COVID-19 pandemic exposed the enormous weakness of the world.
This terrible ordeal has exposed all our weaknesses as a world. as a civilization and as a region, but it is proving progressive forces right. The truth is that Latin America has reacted very badly to the pandemic crisis. We have 8% of the world population, but 30% of the infections. We are going to see a bigger economic decline than the global average. The two countries at the list of death per capita are Peru and Ecuador, two Latin American countries and two countries with neoliberal governments, followed by European countries. But let's remember that the European population is older, and consequently, there is a higher mortality rate.
The former Ecuadorian president also expressed his concern about the economic impacts of the pandemic, as the negative effects are affecting the poorest.
Concerned not only about the short-term problems, but also about the economic crisis which, once the pandemic has been defeated, can be recovered with the right policies. The reason to be of economic policies is to overcome the crisis with the least cost, as quickly as possible, and deciding on who bears the cost. But that depends on who is in power, that the richest should bear the cost, not the poorest, that capital should bear it, not human beings. And so far, human beings are bearing the cost, because you can't hold back debts, but you can hold back wages. But where is written that law of physics is only the relation of power who is in charge.
During his speech at the virtual meeting of the Pueblo group, Mexican Foreign Affairs Minister Marcelo Ebrard proposed to join efforts to restore technological autonomy to Latin America.
I believe that the most important lesson for us today as Latin American and Caribbean unity with a progressive approach is to reinstate as the highest priority for us the development of our technological autonomy, on which our capacity to respond and our political strength, but beyond that, even our survival will depend, something that has been mentioned a lot, and I do not have to expand on it.
Argentine Nobel Peace Prize laureate Adolfo Pérez Esquivel announced the key objectives of the virtual International Conference of Solidarity with Haiti, highlighting the demand of the Haitian people for President Jovenel Moïse to hand over power on February 7th.
There are clear objectives in this meeting, not only of solidarity, but to ask President Moise to respect the Constitution and allow the Haitian people to make their decision following February the 7th. And therefore, it is a call for solidarity at the international level, because there are many pending situations facing the Haitian people, such as the acts of the UN Stabilization Mission over so many years.
In this sense, Pérez Esquivel denounced how the richest countries, as well as the United Nations, continue to oppress the Haitian people with debts resulting from military interventions and shady actions of the International Monetary Fund.
The other thing is the mobilization of the Haitian people in order to achieve the right to self-determination. There is a serious crisis, one of poverty and marginality, but also of the rich countries that continue to oppress the Haitian people. The United Nations must provide answers regarding the cholera outbreak and its mission, and also to respect that they cannot continue to oppress the Haitian people with an immoral and unjustified debt.
We're taking one last break. More news in a minute. Welcome back. African presidents attended a summit in Angola this Friday to resolve the situation in the Central African Republic, where violence has displaced more than 200,000 people in less than 2 months.
The heads of state and government condemned the abuses and killings committed against civilian, humanitarian, and UN peacekeepers and called for justice to be done. The heads of state and government renewed their commitment to promote dialogue and permanent consultation between political actors and civil society, with a view to getting the country out of the current crisis, in accordance with the recommendation of the extraordinary ECAC summit held in Brazzaville on December 26, 2020.
Rwanda has been ranked first in Africa and 6th globally in managing the COVID-19 pandemic. The Australian Lowy Institute ranked a total of 98 countries globally, gauging their level in terms of average performance in managing the pandemic within 36 weeks. According to the findings, Rwanda has increased its testing capacity with over 4,000 daily tests. The country's death toll is 183, which represents 1.3% of people infected. The report revealed that smaller populations and capable institutions were big factors in successfully dealing with the pandemic. Togo ranked second in Africa and 15th globally, followed by Tunisia at 21st, Mozambique at 26, Malawi at 27, and Zambia at 29. Top 3 countries that showed the best pandemic management were New Zealand, Vietnam, and Taiwan. On Friday, Zimbabwe extended its nationwide lockdown measures until February 15th. Vice President and Health Minister Constantino Chiwenga delivered a live address on the latest extension of the level 4 lockdown among a spike in coronavirus-related deaths and rising infections, considering that the measures had stabilized the situation, but there were a risk of new variants of the virus spreading. President Emerson Mnangagwa had imposed a 30-day national lockdown on January 5th after new cases. Zimbabwe has reported over 32,600 cases, coronavirus cases, and 1,160 deaths. Indian police reported the arrest of 44 people following the caravan of tractors through the capital as part of ongoing farmers' protests. New Delhi police reported that among those arrests is a man accused of attacking an officer. Meanwhile, farmers in the town of Muzaffargarh demonstrations against the government's 3 agricultural laws in support of farmers holding protests in Wasipur along union leader Rashek Tikai. In Lebanon, the economic crisis aggravated by the COVID pandemic and strict lockdown measures had led the protests in the city of Tripoli this week, resulting in at least 400 injured. Anti-government demonstrations of many unemployed and struggling citizens have spread throughout the country since the beginning of the week, with major hotspots such as Tripoli as the country experiences one of the most pronounced outbreaks of coronavirus in the world, according to the health authorities. The health crisis has forced the government to impose a 24-hour curfew for an indefinite period, aggravating the economic crisis in the country. According to the United Nations, more than half of the population is now living below the poverty line. Social movements and political organizations have blamed the crisis on the corrupt governments. On Friday, health workers at the Rabat hospitals were among the first to receive the coronavirus jab in Morocco, a day after the country's vaccination program kicked off. The vaccinations will take place in more than 3,000 centers across the country and mobilize more than 12,000 health workers. Morocco received its first shipment of vaccines doses in recent days from China's Sinopharm and Swedish company AstraZeneca. Health Minister Khalid Atil Taleb said more vaccine deliveries will be coming over the next 3 months, and their objective is to reach 80% of the population. The country has one of Africa's most advanced vaccination programs.
The most important policy for us is that this campaign should be gradual in getting and distributing the vaccine so that it takes place in a very organized manner. We are aiming for various categories, but gradually. We are expecting more deliveries of the vaccine during the month of February, March, and April. The most important is that the campaign runs smoothly because our objective is to reach 80% of the population as His Majesty wishes. This is over 30 million people. If we manage to reach this target and if everyone adheres to this campaign, then we will attain collective immunity.
Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a 5-year extension of the START nuclear treaty with the United States. President Putin signed the federal law of ratification that seeks to extend the treaty between Washington and Moscow, which relates to measures to reduce and limit their strategic offensive nuclear arms, first established in 2010. After a telephone conversation between the Russian and U.S. presidents on January 26, It was agreed that the respective working teams will fine-tune the details of the extension of the treaty until 2026. The nuclear disarmament pact limits the arsenal of the two powers to a maximum of 700 deployed missiles, as well as 1,550 nuclear warheads and 800 launchers deployed in reserve. In Italy, several right-wing parties asked President Sergio Mattarella to dissolve parliament and call for new elections to resolve the political crisis of the country. According to local media, President Mattarella started consultation to define possible solutions to the crisis unleashed after new former Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte lost his political support and was forced to resign last Tuesday. According to the head of the state's spokesman, Giovanni Grasso, Mattarella gave the president of the lower house of parliament the task of negotiating a new coalition that will allow the recovery of a new government majority. According to political analysts, Conte maintained his ambitions of obtaining a new mandate with the support of the Five Star Movement and the center-left Democratic Party. We come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.